This photo from the World Cup is going viral right now. An Iranian player holding up a child's backpack. It stands for the 168 girls killed in Trump's war in Iran. This is the biggest political story of the year, the Iran war showing up on the biggest sporting event in the world, the World Cup. The only problem with this photo is that it's completely fake. If you're familiar with the bombing of the school in Iran that killed 168 girls, it does not take a genius to understand why this image went viral. But here's what nobody's talking about. This is not really about a fake photo. It's about a foreign policy the United States has run for decades, regime change. And the failure of regime change in Iran is connected to the reason why Africa has more military coups than any other region on earth. You see, as long as the Western countries, like America, stay at the top of the global hegemony, this pattern will never stop. And in this video, we're going to break down why. From the start of the Iran war, it was clear the United States wanted regime change in Iran, not just the nuclear program to be dismantled. On the day the war began, Donald Trump said this.
To the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
And indeed, the bombs did drop. One of the first missiles struck a school, killing 168 Iranian girls. That moment became the origin of the backpack symbol carried not only by the Iranian football team at the World Cup, but by Iran's own negotiating team when they sat down with the United States for the ceasefire and the peace deal that would follow. If you're still not convinced that regime change was part of Trump's agenda, a few days after the war started, Trump was asked the question directly.
Do you want regime change in Iran?
Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen.
Who would you want to take over?
What?
Who would you want to take over?
I don't want to talk about that. There are people.
The line that reveals the most is the line at the end. That single phrase says it all. It means that he had someone or a few someones in mind to take over. This was never only about removing a government. It was about who would replace it. And when it comes to foreign policy, this has been the United States' modus operandi for a long time. According to America's own Jeffrey Sachs, the United States inherited this mentality from the British colonial period, who practiced it for decades before the United States. If a government will not give you what you want, often its natural resources, you simply change it. You don't negotiate it. Hence the word regime change. Real hard research backs this up, by the way. Political scientist Lindsay O'Rourke wrote an entire book on exactly this pattern called Covert's Regime Change, America's Secret Cold War. She documented 70 cases where the United States tried to change another country's government between 1947 and 1989. And that count does not include whatever has happened since. For example, we know they did something in Ukraine with Yanukovych. That was part of the prelude to what would then become the Russia-Ukraine war that we're still seeing happening right now. In O'Rourke's book, 64 of those 70 attempts were covert, meaning they were hidden from the American public and from the world at large. Only 6 were ever openly acknowledged. Of the 64 attempts, 25 succeeded in installing a government America wanted, 39 failed. For decades, America hid this. But now, under Donald Trump, and when it comes to Iran, it says it out loud. In fact, think of Venezuela. When you just openly accuse a foreign nation of having a crook for a president, and then you just go in and change that president, and proudly call it regime change and then execute on it, doing all of that, flying in the face of international law. This is definitely a sign that something has changed. It would seem that a similar situation would happen with Iran a few weeks later. And that became the far more damning example, a war now widely seen as a strategic failure by the United States. A country that spends decades hiding this kind of operation is now announcing it in advance, proudly with its chest. That's a loss of restraint and a loss of fear of consequences. Regime change and coups are not separate things, not necessarily. You could call them cousins. A coup d'etat is simply a regime change with boots on the ground instead of policy and statement. When Trump tried this version in Iran, believing he would get away with it the same way it worked in decades prior, it all fell apart and it did not work. But that failure does not mean that this has not been very successful for the United States. It means that this time, the world was watching closely enough to see it happen in real time. The same playbook has been running across Africa for decades. And unfortunately, it's much easier to run in Africa than it is to run in a country like Iran, especially when it's such a public war in front of the world. When these operations fail, the world finds out. When they succeed, the people who succeeded control the government, the media, and the story told afterwards. Silence is not proof that nothing happened. Silence is often proof that it worked. Which brings me back to that photo for a second. For once, the people who usually control the narrative did not get to control this narrative. The image may have been fake, but it spread faster than anyone could contain it. And for the moment, the story belonged to the public instead of the powerful. And that is a turning point, considering all countries, including the United States, participate in propaganda, or in their terms, information operation. You may have noticed that some of the videos on this channel have been removed over the past few weeks. On top of that, some have been demonetized. I've accepted that as a channel that fights for African sovereignty, that pushes back against imperialism and neocolonialism, there's a chance that this channel will be removed altogether. It's already happened to some other significant channels that talk about the same kind of stuff. That's why I asked those of you who want to support this channel to join my Substack. There's a free plan which acts as an insurance because we're connected email to email. So if anything does happen to this channel, we can still regroup and relaunch. There's also a paid tier for those who want to support further. It directly helps sustain this work, and it's the cost equivalent to spending on a cup of coffee about once a month. There's a link in the description below, and I look forward to connecting with you there. So as I stated before, Africa has often been a target of these regime changes, and they often come in the forms of coups. In many countries, it's been happening since the beginning of their independence. The most famous case, of course, I talk about a lot is Patrice Lumumba, the Congo's first democratically elected leader, most popular leader. He wanted his country's resources to benefit his own people instead of Belgium, and the West did not like that at all. He was removed from power and killed within months of taking office. The Western governments helped make that happen, including the United States CIA. You see, controlling a foreign country does not require invading it necessarily. It only requires controlling who is allowed to lead it. And that single idea often produces these military coups or regime changes. The incentive underneath almost all of these situations is resource wealth. The African nations targeted this way tend to sit on valuable minerals and natural resources. And in the case of Sudan, we're seeing that happening live right now. The United Arab Emirates has been backing the militia in Sudan's civil war. And one of the reasons it wants that access is because of the gold that Sudan has. This basic mechanism repeats everywhere. An external power has a financial incentive to fund a takeover. If a country is successful in controlling the leader, then you have the other opportunity for a different type of coup to happen. And that's exactly what happened in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. A sovereignty movement that seeks to take back control of its territory. And guess what happens? They get vilified and crucified in the media with propaganda. Something like a picture that might be fake, except their propaganda works in the opposite direction. And then some coups are just driven by people who are corrupt on the inside that want to control a country, and they still have no intention of helping the people. This keeps happening because another group doesn't like that and then comes and it takes it again. And then you just have this cycle of coups happening every few years, and bloodshed happens in between. Gabon is the clearest example of the outside force taking a country for decades and controlling it. No prizes to guess that I'm talking about France here. The Bongo family passed power from father to son with France's backing for decades. Then in August 2023, Brice Oligui Nguema, Ali Bongo's own cousin, seized power in a coup many had hoped was Gabon finally pushing back against France. But unfortunately, it wasn't. Want some evidence of that? Check out this clip.
Do not make any other communications.
Understood.
This is what you signed here. Life is not resentment. What happened here is a step. It is better that it is us here as a family than someone else. If it was another soldier who was here, it would have been a disaster. It would have been worse than this. You are not in prison. You are here. Perhaps the conditions are not the same as home, but you are not in prison. And I was saying this to President Macron. They are not in prison. Let's stop pretending otherwise. Today, we free you. There is no vengeance. There is no need to say, I'm going to get my revenge.
The man talking was Brice Nguema, the president himself, who had just taken power from his cousin Ali Bongo. In that room, he was speaking to Ali Bongo's son and wife, and that video was leaked on the day that President Macron was visiting Gabon. Just think about what he says when he talks about this is what you signed here. A coup that comes with a signed agreement is a negotiated transition, not a coup. He compares himself to other soldiers that would have caused a disaster instead of himself. That is him admitting on this leaked video that his takeover existed to stop the real Burkina Faso-style coup happening and a real figure like Ibrahim Traoré taking power. Why? Because Ali Bongo was becoming weak. When people see weakness, they see their opportunity. So what did Nguma have to do? He had to be the new strongman and get the blessing of France to do it. The other absolutely striking moment in this clip is where he talks about telling President Macron that the Bongo family is being treated well. We are well past speculation here. This is the clearest documented case we have of a coup staged to prevent a real coup. For every Ibrahim Traoré, there is a Brice Nguma. And it is astounding that he was able to get away with this in front of the global community with Macron, who is supposed to be a leader in the global community. Indeed, Trump signed his peace agreement with Iran at the Palace of Versailles with Macron sitting next to him, somebody that is allegedly actively controlling an African president. You've just seen the evidence on tape right now. But it's Africa, so the global community doesn't seem to care much. They don't seem to care much when Sudan has ethnic cleansing to the tune of hundreds of thousands of people and millions of people displaced. They don't seem to care much when France blatantly controls 14 countries' currency with no sight of bringing any kind of financial independence to any of those countries so they can carry on their business and deal with their affairs without the control of France. Think about buying goods from a country where you print the money. That dynamic is just all wrong, and that's exactly what France continues to do in 2026. So I've given you one or two examples here, but the numbers are quite astounding. Since 1950, Africa has had roughly 220 coup attempts or successful coups, and that's about 44% of every coup that's ever happened in that same time period across the rest of the world. Latin America, of course, is in second place. Its proximity to America probably has a lot to do with that. It has roughly 146 attempts, about 30% of the global total. So between Africa and South America, that's basically where all the coups happen. Sudan has had more coup attempts and successes than any other African country, 18 in total. Burkina Faso has had the most successful coups at 9. This density is a direct, measurable result of decades of external interference landing on top of resource wealth, hitting from outside and from inside at the same time, and this goes way beyond being a cultural flaw. This is why it's important to highlight the Iran situation. That story broke through probably because it wasn't an African story. The world did not suddenly develop a conscience around regime change. Iran was just too big, too loud, too important to make it disappear. And of course, America failed on a lot of fronts when dealing with that war. You cannot quietly bury a war involving a nuclear program, a region full of allies and a population of 90 million people watching. However, you can quietly bury something happening in, say, Niger, not only because it's a smaller population, but also because they speak French. It's not really in the zeitgeist of the Anglophone world. This is also why it's been happening to Africa for so long. Nobody cares and nobody really notices. The operations that succeed don't generally produce photos like the Iran situation with the backpacks at the World Cup. When I told you earlier, silence is what success looks like in many of these situations, that is exactly why Africa rarely gets a moment like this, and Iran just did. This part should make you angry, not just informed. There is a reason nobody with real power calls it out. And this part is another wrinkle to this that I think many people kind of overlook. Sometimes you could speculate that the reasons that these things go unnoticed is because countries don't want to be called out for their own wrongdoings in their own little corner of Africa. So we'll turn a blind eye to France so that Portugal can do something over here, etc., etc. Now, I'm not saying I have hard evidence for this, but we can all connect the dots. Also, the global institutions designed to police this sort of thing have becoming less and less relevant. They never empowered African nations to be able to do much about it anyway. Africa has no representation on the United Nations Security Council. They can be veto voted out of many things by just a handful of nations, one of which is the United States. So what is the solution here? I believe the solution is the unification of an economic bloc that is Africa. The countries can stay separate, but they should all work together under one economic standard. It would be much harder to manipulate Africa if all of the resources that people were trying to take were jointly managed by the entire continent. You can't just take something from Sudan without the rest of Africa giving the okay. This would make the situation much larger. The population under that economic zone is 1.5 billion people, a group the size of China, a group the size of India, much more difficult to manipulate and steal from. So if you're interested in diving a bit deeper into the way a country like France, for example, has taken utter control of a country like Gabon, I suggest you watch the video you're seeing on the screen right now. You'll get way more into the weeds with Macron. See you over there next.